And my friend who knows paper says cotton doesn't want to be paper. Hemp and flax want to be paper. But the plants themselves are so different. Flax is hard to grow. It can't compete with weeds very well at all. It depletes the soil way more than hemp does and requires a much richer soil than hemp. Now, there's an old world word called hemp croft. And croft, in one of its meanings, is a small field or small farm. Something in there, either one of those. And my theory on that is that it was the refuse pile, because when they talked about hemp croft, it was usually a small hemp field next to the cottage. And I think, this is my unscholarly opinion, what grows in the compost pile? Hemp seeds. That's where you can get your own little private fiber stash, because they grow close together without any work from you in your kind of what we may call refuse heap, compost pile today we may call it. And another time they use crofting in reference to fiber is when I talked about natural bleaching. Another word for natural bleaching is crofting. And in my paper making and fiber work, one of my greatest discoveries has been made by mistake, leaving fibers out in the weather. And I already knew about the Japanese hanging their paper fiber out in the winter for natural bleaching. And I thought that was cool. But really, once I saw it happen by accident, I began to do it on purpose. And then you can read about it too. For the finest fiber, they were often naturally bleached, not only as fiber, but as textile. You lay out the textiles out in a freshly mown field. The Dutch were famous for doing natural bleaching. In fact, Ireland would send their woven textile, their linens, over to Holland to get crofted or naturally bleached. And sometimes they'd use their sour milk, and then that's a form of enzyme retting. Like you remember, this was enzyme retted, this hemp fiber I'm using right now. But that was a natural form of enzyme retting. Or they could just pour water on it. I've got pictures of women of Ruthenia, which I think, like southern Poland, I believe. They had grown, processed, spun, woven their own textile out of hemp, and they had it up on the rocky shore, and they were in there in the water, in the creek, and they were throwing water up on that cloth to naturally bleach it. And so the process of wetting and drying in sun and all that would naturally bleach. What does naturally bleach do? It gets rid of the non-cellulose. Because in the end, you want fairly pure cellulose. And kids, I want to tell you something about that. You know what happens when you don't brush your teeth? It gets that goo on it. And then that's where tooth decay can begin. Because if you got really clean teeth, then all kinds of tooth decay have a hard time starting. It's the same thing with pure cellulose. Once you get your textile woven, you want to get rid of all the non-cellulose so it can be nice and clean, pure cellulose, because any non-cellulose is a, a site for deterioration, decay, mold, just like in your teeth. So you want good, clean fiber, or else it gets rotten a lot quicker. And that's what happened with that Kentucky fiber, is that there's so much non-cellulose in there because they didn't get it really pure. just good enough to make some crude string rope out of it. And it decayed very quickly because of that. Not only the chemical wet deterioration, but actual abrasion happens because the non-cellulose actually makes it abrade itself, let alone all the other bad stuff. So you see why the Russian stuff was so good. And what farmer wants to make a living trying to do that to compete with the Russians? They don't want to.